Prepare your brains. I've been watching horror films now probably for like the past like 5-ish years, maybe a little bit more. I got it pretty late in the game because I always thought that horror films were terrible. They were really bad. They were just like torture porn and I hated them. And I kind of blame the movies that came out when I was a teenager, like Saw and that sort of thing. That's never been my thing. It's still not my thing, even though I do watch horror now. What I really enjoy about horror films is that they're really psychological. It's never just a monster, at least the good ones aren't just a monster. They represent something that scares us, something that troubles us, something that we have to overcome, and that's the aspect that I really enjoy, is like the way that they can visually and through monsters or subtext explore these different things that we don't like about ourselves. So I still very much consider myself a newbie, but I have seen quite a lot of horror films in the last few years. Some of them are more mainstream and some of them are more indie or lesser known, and that's what happens when you date a horror film geek. So I wanted to share some of my favorite horror movies that I've watched recently that aren't like super well known. You might have seen some of these for sure. I'm not saying that this is a list of impossible movies to find. It's just films that I don't think most people have seen and thought maybe you would enjoy them for this Halloween season. So I thought, why not start with a movie for people who don't like horror films? I understand that. Horror films are a little scary sometimes. So it's nice to have something that's not super creepy. So I do suggest What We Do in the Shadows. It's a great vampire mockumentary where we follow along 3 main vampires and then also a new vampire and kind of see what it's like to be a vampire nowadays. It's really funny, it's still Halloweeny because they're all vampires and it's still the right atmosphere, but it's funny, it's not gonna give you nightmares. And also, if you like Flight of the Conchords, you will notice some people in there. The movie is really funny, it's really creative, and I 100% recommend it, even for those of you who are like, I'm not watching anything on this list. My next suggestion is for the movie Rubber. So I'm gonna kind of ease you into the more scary things. Rubber is a movie about an evil tire that drives around, well, rolls around, and makes things explode, like people's heads. It's just as over the top as you can imagine. It's very funny because it's outrageous, but it's also really well shot, and frankly, you feel for that tire just a little bit. So if you want to watch something that will make you chuckle a little bit, but also kind of feels like an art film, I recommend Rubber. So this next one feels a little bit too real right now, but it's Green Room, which follows a punk band that accidentally gets a show in front of neo-Nazis, and then they witness something and they have to kind of escape from the situation. The movie mostly takes place in the Green Room itself, and it's one of those great captured in a space, so they have to be really creative with the space type of films, which I really enjoy. I appreciate when they clearly think about how visually they're going to represent it, and Green Room is a great example. The choice of color and the way things are shot is really impressive and very beautiful. So I do recommend it. It's a bit more intense, so I'm just escalating you. I really recommend it because it's a very creative film that will kind of give you a new perspective on what a horror film can be, I think. So for number 4, it's definitely one of the favorite movies that I saw that year, which is probably like 2 years ago, and it might be one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, and it's called Pontypool. Pontypool is a Canadian film, so hey, and you can definitely tell that, and I say that in the best possible way. It 100% feels Canadian to me. This is another one of those movies where they're stuck in a space. So basically we follow some people that work in a radio station. We see a zombie apocalypse, but we're isolated in a very small space, far away from where the actual action is happening. What's fascinating about this, because honestly, like, I'm a little bit over zombies. I still like a zombie here and there, but we like went full on at some point, and I thought it might have been a bit too much. But what's great about this is their approach to zombies. The movie focuses on language quite a bit, in part because they are in a radio station, so it makes sense, like all that we hear is voices from them and from people on the outside, so it's very language focused, which is something that I find particularly Canadian. We're very focused on language because we have 2 official languages. We have conflict between those languages. It's always a battle, so I think it really expresses kind of like the turmoil of kind of Canadian identity through a zombie apocalypse. And my last suggestion is for anyone who's looking for a Halloween specific film. I'm suggesting for number 5, Trick or Treat. So it's an anthology, so we follow several stories that aren't connected at all except for one small character named Sam, a small trick-or-treater with a burlap sack on his head. He's recurrent throughout all of this, but otherwise they're all pretty different. What's interesting about these is the focus on tradition. The horror only really occurs when tradition is broken. So it's kind of an interesting perspective on how we treat the holidays, how we all have our specific traditions associated to each of them. I certainly have some for Halloween. We've talked about that actually in the video last year, if you guys want to check that out. But I am really tradition focused, so that kind of speaks to me. And they're all like super creative and very different from one another. So if you're looking to watch something on Halloween, I recommend that. So that was my list. Have you guys seen any of these? If you have, let me know what you thought about them in the comments. Also, let me know if you have any suggestions. I'm always open to that. If you want to check out our last video, click here somewhere. Ooh. If you want to, you can click like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.